Have you ever sat down to watch a quick 10-minute video and before you know it, you've already checked your phone? Not once or twice, but several times. Sound familiar? Maybe you've been there. You open an app just to pass a few minutes, and before you know it, an hour has passed. You're left restless, almost hollow. Or maybe you've been caught in a binge watching spiral, telling yourself just one more episode won't hurt, even though you know you should have stopped like 5 episodes ago. Well, I've been that too, and I'm here to tell you it does matter. That one extra swipe, that last episode, it all adds up. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you felt truly bored? No phones, no background noise, no notifications. Just pure silence. If you can't remember, you're not alone. We've essentially engineered boredom out of existence, and in doing so, we may have lost something pretty important, I'd say, and that is our ability to focus. Why do I say that? Well, does sitting with a book feel hard? Does reading or studying or just sitting still feel impossible? A major player in this process is a chemical messenger in our brains called dopamine. Dopamine is what makes us chase pleasure, why we crave excitement, and what pulls us to every new thing. Neuroscientists often describe a balancing act in our brains called the opponent process theory. The idea is that for every signal towards pleasure, our brain sends a counter signal to bring us back to baseline. Here's the catch, our brains love balance. Think of it as a scale with pleasure on one side and pain on the other. And every time we spike the signals towards like pleasure, our brain sends a counter signal to bring us back to baseline, which is what we experience as a craving or a low. And in a world designed for instant gratification, we keep tipping these scales towards pleasure without ever letting it rest. And what happens when our brain gets stuck in this endless loop of constant stimulation? And more importantly, how do we break free? Well, to understand where we really are today, let's take a step back. Not too long ago, just about 2 million years ago. While we can't scan ancestral brains, we can be pretty sure that the same dopamine system that drive us today would have reinforced life-saving behaviors for our ancestors. For our ancestors, life wasn't about binge watching or doom scrolling. Life was harsh and cruel. Every morning was a threat to their very existence. Life was survival of the fittest, and dopamine was a survival tool. It rewarded every small victory essential for survival. Things like hunting, gathering, building a shelter, making a fire, finding a water source. For our ancestors, the struggle itself was part of the reward, and the reward was earned, not given. Fast forward to today. The world doesn't ask for patience anymore. We don't need to hunt for food, it's delivered to our doors. We don't need to seek out entertainment. It autoplays before we even have the chance to decide. I mean, have you all seen Netflix's condescending message, "Are you still watching?" We don't need to work hard for validation. It comes instantaneously in the form of likes, shares, and comments. So, what happens when our brain overindulges in all this? Well, that's a story for later. On the surface of it, it looks like progress, comfort, convenience. But what the mirror misses is a fundamental shift in our very ability to focus. Our capacity to strive is being chipped away at. What once demanded resilience, focus, and effort has been reduced to an effortless click and comes with a skip intro button. But here's the good news, our futures are not written in stone. How we choose to spend our most valuable resource, that is our attention, will decide where we go next. Here's a paradox for you. I was ambitious yet strangely stuck. I dreamt of studying hard, making the most of every opportunity. But somehow, all my plans ended in procrastination and failure. My turning point came in the most unexpected and casual way. I was chatting with my best friend about my YouTube feed, and he said, "Watch this, bro, you really need it." He was referring to a video titled, "How Dopamine Detox Changed My Life." I trusted him, so I watched it. And it was a 10-minute video, so what's the harm, right? The irony, though, is that I checked my phone during that video as well. But, anyways, that video was a wake up call. I realized something uncomfortable. The very things that I thought were harmless, social media, reels, endless gaming, junk food, were hijacking my brain just as any addictive drug would. Okay, in hindsight, maybe the endless gaming wasn't such a good idea. And here's the catch: society has normalized it. We use terms like binge watching or grinding in games like the badges of honor or achievement that make you look cool, when in reality, they don't. I used to brag about watching 50 episodes of an anime in one day or logging 16 hours on a video game after my 10th boards. In reality, these are all just signs of an overstimulated dopamine system. Neuroscience breaks it down simply. Our brains fire dopamine in two specific ways. The first, burst firing, the immediate rush we get from novelty or excitement. The second, pacemaker firing, the slow, steady rhythm that sustains long term motivation. But here's the danger. As I said, when we overindulge in these bursts of high dopamine, our brain adapts by becoming less sensitive. That is what scientists call a chronic dopamine deficit state. Imagine turning the volume up so high you can't hear a whisper anymore. The usual hits or joys no longer satisfy. And here's where the mirror misses the truth. Every scroll, every notification, every like, it's not random, it's designed. Companies realized long ago that our attention is worth more than land, gold, or even diamonds. And so they built systems to capture it, moment by moment. The result, not pure evil, but something definitely powerful enough to reshape us. Time may still be money, but today, attention is the real currency. Alright, I know the picture so far has sounded bleak, maybe even a bit grim. But here's the good news: there is a way forward. Our brains are wonderfully plastic. And no, not the kind that ends up floating around in oceans. This plasticity or neuroplasticity is our brain's superpower to reshape, rewire, and rebuild itself, no matter how deep we've fallen into a sea of bad habits. And we can already see the shift happening. We joke about brain rot. We laugh about doom scrolling while actively trying to avoid it. And as everyone knows, awareness is always the first step. I speak from experience. I once lived in procrastination but chased my ambitions. My turning point came when I admitted to myself I couldn't ignore it any longer. I did what I always do when I'm lost. I researched because information is power. I read research papers, listened to podcasts, watched videos, trying to understand why my life felt hijacked. And finally, the pieces fell into place. It wasn't that dopamine was the enemy, it was the fact that modern society had pushed it into overdrive. So, after realizing this, I took the first quantitative and real step towards change. I tried a practice often called a dopamine detox. What this means is stepping away from these addictive sources of constant stimulation for about 7 to 30 days. And that decision, ladies and gentlemen, was transformative. I found that my brain had recalibrated and my focus had returned. But here's the part most people miss: the detox is not the destination, it's only a reset button. What the question isn't how do I get back to normal? Because where you were was modern society's standard of normal. Why do I say that? Well, according to the 2024 UN World Drug Report, around 300 million people are afflicted with drug use disorders. And drugs are just one of the many potent sources of dopamine that can disrupt our natural system. So, what do we do from here? What do we do after the detox? The question isn't what isn't the new normal. What we have to do is we have to build a new life based on sustainable and healthy dopamine. Here's what worked for me. The first is harnessing discomfort. The idea of homeostasis, the concept of small manageable doses of stress making us more resilient. This means doing tasks that scare us. Things like exercise, cold showers, or maybe that homework that's been sitting on your table for the past week. What this does is it makes us more resilient and resets our pleasure thresholds. The second, I noticed that we have to choose meaning over cheap hits. I understood that true fulfillment isn't in the endless scroll. It isn't in the instant like. True fulfillment is in long lasting work and building lasting connections. And finally, mindful reintroduction. Now, some of you might think, does this mean we have to sacrifice everything and disconnect from modern society? Well, no, not at all. What we do now is we reflect and we mindfully reintroduce these pleasures. We ask ourselves these questions. Is this action a part of who I am? Does this suit me? Am I in control of it or is it in control of me? If the answer feels right to all of these, reintroduce it. Play video games for leisure, use social media to connect, but only and only if you're the one steering the wheel, not the cravings are. At the end of the day, it's not about quitting social media or rejecting pleasure. It's about learning to master this force inside of us instead of being mastered by it. And when we hold that balance, we hold the doors to something new. We open the doors to focus, deep work, real conversations, and lasting connections. So, where does that leave us? Disconnected, overstimulated? Well, modern society has slammed into overdrive, and our attention is now a currency being traded between companies and algorithms. So, take it back, use it, control it, because the goal is that moment when we look in the mirror and see someone unshackled by the chains of modern society, someone who is focused, free, and present. You all heard the tale of Icarus, the boy who flew too close to the sun and fell. Well, here's the part most people leave out. As he fell, he laughed, not out of arrogance or hysteria, but out of joy. For Icarus knew that even if only for a fleeting moment, he had flown. He had lived without limits. He had lived life to the fullest. And that's what I want for all of us. To fly not in the cheap highs of dopamine, but to make memories that burn bright enough to be worthy of nostalgia. That is life. Messy, brilliant, and finite. That wave I spoke of, it's already here. You can't stop it, but you can ride it.